Jon, thank you so much for being here with me today.
And it's good to be back with you. And thank you for what you do. You're now doing three per week. So
I know we
you're
both joke about how busy we are with this. It's
yeah.
literally like having another job sometimes, but it's a really nice outlet to sort of take all the stuff that we care about and, express it and get it into the world in a positive way. So you too, you're constantly making content. You have two YouTube channels. You do so much content on your website. You're doing these live videos every week. You are just such a busy bee on top of all the therapy and groups that you work with every single week. So I thought we'd start. You have this really awesome program on Friday nights that you do every single week. And I thought it would be of great value to my audience to know about it. And I wanted to give you some time just to talk about that in the beginning, because I'd love for people to go to your channel, support this. It's an awesome show that you're doing. It's live. People can interact with you. And it's really paired and aligns so well with the material on the show. So I wanted you to share about that so people can go support you.
Well, I appreciate it. And it is on Friday nights. We do it Friday Night Live. I appreciate when you say they can interact. I'm a little bit tech challenged. So what I would say is if they come prepared to interact, don't be discouraged if I don't see it. um, but I was offered a few years ago now an opportunity to have a time slot. Actually, the offer by Ken McClinton, the CEO of the station. It's the largest internet TV station. It has over, I think, 6 million viewers per year. And it's called TECN.TV. It stands for the Exceptional Conservative Network. It's political by nature, but I have a time slot. Again, Ken was good enough he actually wanted me to do more than just an hour, but I only have time right now. So I'm on there from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Friday night. And when I come on, it's live. So it's me in my office staring at the camera, at least with you, Emma. I have somebody to talk to. But those of us that know, if you've ever done any podcast by yourself, you're just staring at a camera and assuming somebody's out there, but it's actually live. But it's really afforded an opportunity. I knew it was the right time, the right thing at the right time, kind of like this. You and I, our work together, for me to begin to systematically put down in kind of successive order, successive programs, what I think are some of the most crucial and important, redundant, crucial of counseling topics, or the topics that really should be tackled in counseling, as well as they lay the groundwork for our own mental health. Hence the reason why I talk about them in counseling. So there's 3 years worth of podcasts now. I have retained the majority of them. I still have about 15 yet to put up. I'm a little behind the scenes there, or behind the scenes. I'm a little late because some require some post-production adjustments. You can access all of them easily or readily by going on the website SurvivorSupport.net under the podcast tab. And if you scroll down, I recommend scrolling all the way down to the bottom, and you will then see where the series began. And that series has to do with boundaries. And there you go. Right. But what I've been doing now since probably 7 months worth. So there's the series on boundaries. If you just each is a standalone program, but you'll see they will build upon one upon the other.
Jon, I'll turn it over to you. I know we've been working on this awesome presentation. I think we're on the third row of this graph that you constructed.
We are on the third row, so we'll pick up where we left off.
Cool.
And then what we're doing is we're a little bit, we definitely left off right there. We got some of the little lines that I've been using. So people are going to watch us or watch me kind of do this in real time as they have been. So what we have here is, and I'll just kind of give a little review by pulling that away. Is this just made on a Word document, by the way? Oh, look at that. So for those that have any sort of dissociation, they are, I'll just speak to you. How's that? I'll speak to you, those of you in the audience. So if you experience dissociation, You're dealing with parts of yourselves. I'm going to get rid of these little, I'll keep these for now because we'll use those. Okay. There are parts of it, just like anyone has unconscious parts, right? There's parts to all of us that are just below the surface. That's a normal human experience. None of us have a difficult time with the idea of daydreaming. How do we explain daydreaming? Well, there's a part of me that you can be talking to me, but if I'm daydreaming, I think about how many teachers know their kids are daydreaming, right? So that means if a part of, we'll say the detached part, right? The part is daydreaming of being outside of class, but we'll say Mary, the student, is sitting there staring at the teacher, but she's thinking of going to Tahiti, the student, Mary is, right? So, and then when the teacher says, Mary, are you listening? Whoop, right? Mary is front and center and having to uh, try to convince the teacher that he or she was listening. So, mild things. So, it's really on a continuum, our ability to be in more than one place at one time in our mind. Um, so we're fearfully and wonderfully made. It's just a very unique thing that we as humans, we can be having multiple aspects of our brain engaged. Think about driving a car. When Mary, we'll go with this for a second. When Mary began learning how to, actually, there's a couple of things. How about swing on swings when she was young? At first, it was not natural, even brushing teeth, right? We have to help our kids learn how to brush teeth and then help them continue to brush their teeth. Okay. So that's a little skill there if anybody is old enough. And if anybody has raised kids, we remember that we've got to teach them how to brush their teeth. How about swinging? So Mary's going to swing on the swings. I just keep showing you there's Mary. But okay, so Mary needs to learn the skill of swinging on the swings, but eventually it becomes second nature. How about swimming? Okay, there's a point in time in everybody's life where they need to learn to swim. Once you learn to swim or ride a bike, it becomes second nature. So those things become natural to us. There's not just muscle memory, but we can get right back. We can just do it again at any point in time. Okay, so there are parts of us that have skills that can get tucked away and abilities that we don't have to draw upon those, but it's quite something that, and think about driving as well. So when we're learning, that's where I was going with that. So when we're first learning some of those skills, we need to really concentrate. So think about a kid when Mary was first learning how to ride a bike. Think about her concentration. She's tuned the rest of the world out. We remember it when we were first driving, right? You don't want a lot of distraction in the car. We have to concentrate. But by the time we've been driving for a while, we can suddenly be relaxed. And most of us then don't even notice what we've been doing in the car, right? We go from point A to point B, from home to work or home to shopping. And we can listen to the radio, we can talk on the telephone. Um, we don't have to concentrate, but it's amazing that we'll brake, we'll hit the gas, or we'll hit the brake and do gas almost subconsciously. So it's just very natural. That's normal for all of us. So one could say that as Mary is, let's say she's talking to somebody on the phone while she's driving. The question is she fully paying attention? Well, she'll find out that she's not totally paying attention when all of a sudden she slams on the brake before she knows it because the car in front of her slammed on the brakes. So I think it's fair to say that maybe a part of, right, Mary was driving. But again, for the purpose of illustration, just that we are multifaceted. Now, when trauma comes along, that natural ability to have facets of us becomes compartmentalized. And that's the important concept. And then it's on a scale of 1 to 10, let's say, meaning once you've entered the pool of trauma, you start at the shallow end and it gets very deep. But on a scale, so in the pool, I would say that's scale of 1 to 10. How deep is the water? Well, once Dissociation has started once. Once compartmentalization has taken place, that is that will be noticed by what's called dissociation. So again, dissociation is there's a part of me that, or I experience going away, quite frankly. Now, what do we mean by that? I have gaps of time. And what we've talked about in previous episodes, I think three or four back, starting with this chart, is we began looking at the different layers of the most intensive kind of trauma, and that would be satanic ritual abuse and MK Ultra. That would be abuse. So trauma will stem from abuse. That will be the result of people, really sadistic individuals who have purposely perpetrated harm, which is perpetrating crimes, quite frankly. Okay. So this entire chart gives a sense of how many different layers. And you look at kind of the background colors. So what we have is we have the core person, that's very at a very deep level. And then you have that whole section there, the light green. Again, this is just a Word document with a bunch of text boxes. So you see where it says the wounded kids, or in IFS, internal family systems therapy, they call those the exiles. So there's an entire layer, as it were, or level that has young parts, which will match. So the parts will match the age of the abuse when the trauma happened. Then you have what could be considered a middle layer, and IFS calls those the firefighters. I use the term repressed parts. I guess there's different definitions, but if we want to, people can interchange the term suppressed or repressed. I think the actual definition, and when I think of the term repressed, it's like I'm pushing those down. Suppressed, maybe I'm not permitting them to come up. So maybe a little bit of a difference, but you'll see it in terms of inner energy. So the repressed parts, or those that are in the box there that are outlined in red, those are going to be there, and so are the green, when there's been sadistic and ritualistic, and that's an actual term. Ritualistic abuse is abuse that happens over time, really time and time again, in a regular and consistent manner by somebody who has regular and consistent access to the kid. So it's an actual term. It doesn't mean, it's not synonymous with satanic ritual abuse. So ritualistic abuse is not religious. It doesn't have religious connotations. It has, its connotations is, or dealing with the repetitive nature. Okay, so ritualistic meaning it's a ritual, it's happening a lot. And that's what will create then really the red and the green. So if someone has experienced abuse, but it wasn't, it's hard to say abuse isn't sadistic, but there's a difference between growing up in a violent alcoholic home versus a home where there may or may not be alcohol, but the person is getting off on perpetrating harm and they've been waiting for 3 o'clock all day so they and their buddies can come and gang rape somebody. Or they can have a party where the kid's going to be gang raped or trafficked. So there's, that's probably right. We would say people that traffic kids are creating the reds and the green levels. Okay. If you grew up in a home where there's a violent alcoholic, some of the gaslights, but usually this is going to be more, quite frankly, either the violence or sexual abuse. Okay, the blue level. Okay, so if you did not experience ritualistic abuse, but your home life was chaotic and was traumatic, was overwhelming, it's really adversive childhood experiences. If you're familiar with that, that's called ACEs, Kaiser Permanente, out in the West Coast, out in California. Looked at 17,000 client files, and they discovered that there's a close correlation between 10 key experiences in somebody's background as a child and future disease states, really, that comes from stress. And Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps a Score, it speaks to that issue. So if somebody went through adversive childhood experiences kind of to the nth degree, that's where you're going to have the different gradations of blue. So it's probably going to stop there. Now that's enough. Where you get the red and the green levels, those are probably, now I'm thinking about it, that's going to indicate that you really had purposeful sadistic stuff going on. So think about a father or stepfather who is an alcoholic. He's reactive and continues to abuse. That's different than somebody who has a network of people or somebody who is very self-controlled. Because think about an alcoholic who is either violent or still is crossing boundaries. He's still emotionally reactive, meaning he's doing impulsive things. There you go. So the kind of people that will create the red, I'm calling them repressed parts and wounded kids. And by the way, it would be really the green level first and then the red level. That's probably important to know, because the earlier the abuse, the more foundational the damage. And so in looking at this chart, if there is a red level as far as repressed parts, see my little cursor going around here. Okay. If there's a repressed parts, it means, there's no other way to put it, it means that there are younger parts. Okay, and that's why there's kind of, there's a demarcation line. Of course, there's a dotted line right here, but there's a difference between the different gradations of blues versus when you get into the repressed parts, the red background, and then the green. So if you have wounded kids, if you have the IFS exiles, you're going to have unconscious or amnesic parts that they're going to fulfill certain roles. So repressed parts. If you have wounded kids, you have repressed parts, then you will have the rest of these. But if you end up having the suppressed parts, it may not mean that you have the repressed parts and the wounded kids. So this will tend to come from lesser abuse, but it doesn't mean that it's mild, because if it's at this level where it created parts, it was very traumatizing. Okay. But there's a big difference between that kind of abuse and the kind of abuse that will create the rest of this. Okay. And that's where you get eventually SRA and MK Ultra. What's so sick about the perps that do this kind of thing is they know the lay of the land. They know how this works. And I don't know how they know, quite frankly, but they know how to do it. And so they are very intentional. Perps are very intentional. And that's why they get kids when they're young. And or the younger, the better, because what they can do is they can take the child and begin the splitting process. And they do it through trauma. Inevitably, they're raping the children or the child. And then the splitting starts to take place. So that's why I called that one, by the way, the primary protector. And then the splitting and then subsplitting is really the result of these different parts that were there to protect and take over. Let me see if I can move that little guy right there. They're taking over. When they get overwhelmed, then another one, there'll be another split. So another part will take over for the primary one. So the perps know how to do that, and multiple parts are being created. So the person's personality is becoming increasingly segmented. This doesn't have anything to do with IQ. Generally speaking, in order to have that many parts, the IQ has to be very high. So that's just something that tends to go together. So hopefully that can help with your self-esteem. If you identify with this, just know you have a high IQ. Okay, but your perps never thought you'd be able to figure this out. But you are figuring it out, and hopefully this is helping a little bit. Okay, so where you're going to go if you have experienced SRA, MK Ultra, you're looking at this kind of journey from the top down. Okay, so there's going to be different layers. It's going to take time. How long will it take to methodically be able to go from the top down? You're probably looking at a couple of years. But I don't want you to be discouraged, because the question is, how long have you been wrestling with this stuff? But what I would say is this: it will take as long or as short. Okay, so it'll take as long as, this may sound funny, but I'm going to say it anyways. This may take as long as you want it to take. Now, I don't want to discourage anybody or frustrate anybody with that statement. Okay. It's just ultimately, if you think about it, this is all of you. So the more you've reached a point that you are saying, you know what, I'm dying because I haven't wanted to know, makes you normal, quite frankly. I'll shrink this just a bit so you can see the whole picture there. Okay. Meaning, how are things going? And up to this point, we've looked at what are some of the indicators. So go back in some of the past programs, because before Mary starts seeing any of this, right, there are going to be indicators. So we're going to go back up here. She should be behind. Freebird should be behind the scenes. So we'll send her back. I don't know how far back here. It's nothing personal to her. There we go. Okay. So before Mary knows that any of these parts of her are there are indicators, and we've looked at that in the past. But let's say Mary has begun to have a sense of, okay, wait, this is probably more than my imagination. I think this is something that's real. Depending upon how ready she is, nobody's ever going to be fully ready, but if you're at a point where it's like, you know what, I've been dying in a way to not know. So that's what this entire white square represents. Like, I don't know what's down there. So little by little, you've been dying in this state because a lot of stuff's going on. And there are things, I'll make productive use of our little lines here, but stuff has been kind of getting your attention, shall we say. The dissociation, the compulsions, the addictions, the internal voices. What else? Maybe people beginning to ask you questions, right? So there's enough that's coming at you that's letting you know that something's going on. And now the question is, how badly do you want to know? So you're either going to die to not know. So how's it going now? Well, probably not very well. Okay. Even just existing is not living. So maybe that's a form of slow death. You weren't designed to just exist. None of us were. We're designed to be human beings, not human doings. Sometimes just straight up workaholism is just existing. It's just getting in the old grind. Well, that's no way to live. Okay. So depending upon whether or not Mary has reached a point where she says, you know what, I'd rather, even if it kills me, I'm going to find out. So that's one way of saying Mary would rather die than not know. Now, we don't want Mary to die, okay? But meaning, come hell or high water, so to speak, Mary's saying, I've had enough of this. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I'm going to stop. I'm just going to put the brakes on all this craziness. I'm going to find out what's going on. Okay, so she's ready for therapy. She, in terms of, if you're familiar with stages of change, she is beyond the pre-contemplative. She's beyond just thinking about her thinking. She's now ready to make a change. So now it's really internalized. She has the motivation. So she will begin then the process. And so here will be her process little by little. So if you're a therapist, your goal will be little by little, you're going to help Mary understand all of her reality. Okay. So that's where this whole thing's going to go. So what we've been doing in the past programs is we've been looking at, because this can get all a little too busy, a little overwhelming. So we're just unpacking these different layers. You'll have to stay tuned, right, for future programs to look at the wounded kids and the repressed part. But we also have talked about in the past is, if you go back and watch, or you've been with us, we called this little childlike part Tina. And what happens, and IFS calls it storming the gates, right? Where a childlike part comes up or another part comes up. I liken it to a combination of Tina is like playing US NFL football. She's zigzagging through the line and she makes it up. That's one way to view it. The other is that rays of hope, rays of sunshine have reached down into the darkness, and that sounds funny, she's following the light. That light could also represent, and actually, this is very true, that to the extent that the therapeutic relationship, therapeutic rapport between the client and the therapist, the more you start to feel comfortable and you start to trust your therapist, in a good therapeutic way, I'll just use this term, it becomes intoxicating. Now, let me qualify that term, meaning that care and concern and therefore security will start to draw those wounded parts up as well. So that combination, it's almost like therefore okay, let me try this again. Some of you that have been with us, I'm trying my hand at, sorry, I'm going to move the screen here for a second. I'm going to rely upon Word in Word document, some different, no, let's find, we're going to draw. No, we're not. We're going to insert. So I'm going to try to give an example of like a little shaft of light. How's this? Now, I could have used one of the other ones, but I just want to use this one now. So what happens, the more the relationship gets established, now I'm going to color it a different color. There we are. Okay. So what happens is that the more the relationship between Mary and the therapist is getting established, then a couple of things are happening, by the way. As Mary gets to know the therapist, the different parts are starting to get to know the therapist. And that's why, by the way, I don't think I can grab both of these. So let me do one at a time. So when, for instance, the childlike part comes up and talks for Mary, or really not talking for Mary, but the child. So it is now the childlike part and the therapist talking. So both kind of rays of light, rays of hope made it down to some really core parts of Mary. And also, Mary is starting to become comfortable with this process, with the upper layers. And so that sends little shafts of light down. And let's say Tina, who's been in the darkness for all this time, sees a ray of hope. And so she kind of, this may sound funny, she rides that ray of hope all the way up. There's the shaft of light, so to speak. And so she, before you know it, she's up there. And so then Tina and the therapist are talking directly. So that will happen sometimes sooner rather than later, before somebody's had a chance to go all through these different layers. This is very characteristic. So I'm going to have Tina go back just for a moment here. Nothing personal to Tina. So what will oftentimes happen is as we're starting to go down and getting to know these different levels, then because pain has been surfacing, right? And the pain really, there's been emotional infections, emotional pus wounds. That sounds graphic, but it's really important, that term, because they've been in pain. Mary's been in pain. The core of them has been in pain. So at the first sight of hope, not first sight, but once Tina can begin to get a sense that the therapist is safe and secure, then as Mary's defenses are going down, that's a great way to put it, then Mary doesn't even know that a part of her, because her defenses, and we could say these solid lines, really the dotted lines here, the horizontal lines, we could say those are her defenses. As a matter of fact, that's exactly right. We could say, so I'm going to bring this square back up. So we could say right here, Mary's normal, but Mary is very well defended, but it's not a personal statement. It's just, she's cut off from, she's pushed things down. But once she starts to become comfortable with and more relaxed with the therapist, and if she wants to know the truth, we'll say that she becomes less defended, and therefore she has greater access to different aspects of herself, and they have greater aspects to her. I'm sorry, they have greater access. But it also is true that that independent of Mary starting to get to know all of these parts, that because we are all one, right? I mean, this is a lot of parts, but they're all inside of Mary. Then as Mary is starting to get to know herself, as the relationship between Mary and the therapist is getting established, then in a way, different parts at different levels at different times are also starting to get to know. I'll just point this up to me, a little square here, up to the therapist. So that's very true. That's an interesting way to put it. So you're watching live as I'm putting into words, right? So let's say I'm the therapist. I'll just use me because my little picture's up here. Okay, so Mary comes into session. She and I are doing therapy together. But before you know it, as she has become more comfortable with my level of trust and with being able to trust me and my level of competence, because you do need a therapist that has a sense of what they're doing, then what'll happen is she'll begin to relax. That allows the defenses to become, instead of really solid, they become what? Permeable. You can see we've got kind of a dotted line here. It's not so much solid. So where at first she was very defended and therefore staying very intellectual, little by little, she starts to tap into her feelings. And so she's starting to also then get a sense of, I'll move this down over here. She's starting to tap into different parts of her, different ranges of emotions. So she's starting to sense that. And then little by little, she's going to start to go deeper. But also, so that's top down. Well, you also have, now we're going to move it back down here to Tina. So you have parts of Mary that have been longing to connect and to tell their story. And so Tina is able, though oftentimes she is shut down and cut off. So it's almost like there's Tina, but there's this big block, right? Big gap. And Tina hasn't been able to get through because without Mary knowing it, Mary has been too defended. And so the little ones can't get through this barrier. Well, the more that Mary starts to feel comfortable, then the barriers start to drop. She's not as defended. And so that allows, this is very true as well, that allows Tina, because Tina's kind of been listening every now and then, but the more Mary, let me bring Mary, hold on, let's find, there we are. The more Mary starts to be able to relax, without knowing it, Mary's going to start to go into altered states. Mary's going to start to dissociate. Mary's going to start to, she doesn't have to be on point. So that allows the shafts of daylight, and really then what's sinking in is truth. So truth is starting little by little to make its way. We should almost have a different, you know what, let me see if I can do a different, I've never done this one before, but let me try this. We're going to insert. Okay, and then we're going to do, this will be interesting. Okay, let's see if this one works. So truth is going to begin to kind of zigzag its way down. Stay with me now because we'll find out if we can make it down to Tina. Right down into there. Now let me increase that. Stay with me here. We're going to find out. Oh, it worked. It worked. Okay, there you go. That's pretty good. I really like that. So if you're watching this, you saw it here live first. Okay, that's a pretty good. So where Frank Anderson would call that storming the gates, I might say that two things have happened. Connection is being made up to the surface where Tina is able to hear more of what's going on in the present day. It's slipping by these defenses, but then also, okay, we're going to draw another one here. Maybe I'll just, now, let me draw another one because this will be helpful. So we're going to insert, we're going to, oh, I could have used that other one. Huh? We're going to do another squiggly one. And then since I see my picture up there, what happened? Let's do this again. We're going to draw, nope. We're going to go, I'm buying time here, folks. Hold on just for a second. Okay. Does that work? Nope. Okay. Maybe that one works. Well, I don't. So if ideally I could draw two, my computer's not working here and not cooperating. We would have two lines. Maybe I can do this. We will. And if anybody wants to do their own, this is how you do it, by the way, with Word documents. So we're going to do copy, and then we'll just do paste. Let me see if I can get. It worked. Yeah, that was pretty good. Thank you very much. So I'm actually just going to reverse this. Okay, so Tina is starting to have greater connection with, let me see if I can do that. Okay, with Mary, she's starting to hear, for instance, what's going on in the session. And then I will make that thinner. And then Tina is starting to become a part of the session without the therapist initially being aware of it. So Tina is starting to have access. This is good because this is exactly what's going on. So Tina is starting to hear and really sense and tap into Mary. Actually, Tina has known this all along, but there's less to defend. So Tina is starting to have more direct access, tapping into Mary. Mary is starting to have a sense that something is going on. So Mary is tapping into Tina's emotions now kind of directly, where before a lot of different cutoff. And so during the session, so this is two ways to show dissociation, right? Before, what I've done is I've shown that Tina comes to the surface, okay? And IFS will talk about storming the gates. And that's still, I use that, the idea of Tina came to the surface. Tina, I use it really like American football, right? Zigzag through the line and she comes up. She made it through it, all these defenses. But we could also say at the same time, let's say prior to Tina coming up, because that represents Tina coming out and Mary getting pulled in. Okay, so when Tina, the 6-year-old, finally shows herself, she's not really 100% going to show herself. So she's going to be kind of communicating sort of indirectly in two ways. The line to me, so I don't want to confuse my audience here, partway through, Tina will be really tapping into me, meaning listening to me as the therapist. So Mary is listening, but what Mary's going to find is Mary's still present in session, but it's now she's present for 2 minutes, then misses 15 seconds worth. Present for a minute and a half, and all of a sudden misses a few more moments or a minute or two. And what's happening is there isn't the full-blown Tina coming out. So we could say probably for a couple of reasons. Maybe there's still enough defenses because I tell you what, by the time Tina comes out, a lot of these layers are aware something's going on, right? The shock waves to create the fissures that Tina is going to be able to zoom through all the way up to daylight. Those will come from little droplets of truth and the pull of the hope from the relationship between Mary and the therapist. Because a couple of things are going on. If damage was caused by relationships, so think about a perpetrator, the kind of perpetration that'll create these different levels, we could say that's a relationship. Certainly not a beneficial one, a hurtful one, a sadistic one, but that's also where we get the term trauma bonded. But if you've been with me, you'll know I don't really like that term because it's a misnomer. It's really, the better term is half-baked healing. It's the best way to understand it. So in the movie Tangled, I've referenced that a lot. When Rapunzel first gets out of the tower, she leaves the tower with Flynn Rider, and she's swinging. Was it on a swing or by her hair, right? Around that tree. And she says, best day ever. And then all of a sudden she says, oh, I'm the worst daughter. I'm a horrible daughter. And Flynn Rider walks up to her and he says, it seems to me that you're at war with yourself. Okay, great concept. So in a way, right now, different parts are at war with themselves. But when Tina is able to finally come up, then there's going to be, in a way, these little channels are sort of going to go away because then Tina has more direct access to come up. And that also really is based upon the degree of connection that has taken place with the therapist. So as I mentioned, the damage was done through a relationship, so the healing will come through a relationship. So let's say now Tina and I get to know one another. Okay, the therapist needs to keep in mind, and ultimately Mary will need to keep in mind, and so this will be important for everybody to keep in mind, which is this, and this speaks to the dynamic of borderline personality disorder, which is this: it's oftentimes very natural, if I've been wounded, to start to, without knowing it, to believe that another human being can help save me. And that's really important for clients to know, right? The best way to view a therapist, I believe, is like a coach. We're in there with you, but we're not playing the game, meaning you're on the field of play. We hopefully will have skills. We hopefully have perspective. We have knowledge base, but you're the one that's going to have to be slugging it out down the field. So ultimately, we're here. A therapist is here to support, to encourage, to provide insight, to do the chalk talk, so to speak, give you a lay of the land, run some plays, suggest which plays to run, meaning how to move forward. Another analogy that I've used before, as we all have been talking, is like a safari guide. So a therapist is that safari guide that you're hiring him. And that's the difference between a therapist and a friend. You don't have to pay a friend. Now, hopefully your therapist will be friendly. Hopefully they're going to be, oh, this sounds strange. Well, I'm going to use this. This just came to my mind. Almost like your OBGYN. Now, okay, before I lose half my audience, I am not, and nor would I be an OBGYN. There's a, okay. But anyways, meaning there's certain positions that, that you hire somebody for a very intimate purpose, okay? So a therapist, matter of fact, a therapist is going to hear all sorts of stuff, right? A therapist is, especially if this whole dynamic fits you, what that means is eventually you're going to connect with sexual abuse and you will feel exposed. You will feel like a rape survivor. So it's a very difficult thing. So you want to make sure that you can trust the person. But at the end of the day, no human being is going to be able to save you. Okay, meaning you can't look to a human being to you. That's where God comes in. He's the wonderful counselor. Okay, but the reason you're hiring an expert, ideally hiring a professional, is you're expecting them to do their job. Okay? And so part of that job is to at least know the field, to know the game, right? If they're going to be a coach and you're playing U.S. football or any sport or gymnastics or something, hopefully they have a fund of knowledge. That's why you're hiring them. But also they are a trailblazer with you. So you're hiring them. They are the guide that's going to go with you from, you're trekking through the Amazon or through, the jungles or through Africa. It's your journey, but hopefully this trailblazer, right, is going to know what they're doing. So you're hiring the trail guide, and he's going to take you over the hills and down into the valleys. But there are going to be times where you're going to have to go down into the mine shaft, so to speak. Okay, not like a canary in the mine shaft, but there are going to be times where he's going to hold the rope, but you're going to have to go down in there. But he's going to get you back out. That's a pretty good analogy, quite frankly. Okay, I'm going to cover this up now because, again, giving you more of an overview. I'm going to look at the communication between Tina and I. Eventually, it'll become very direct, but Tina, um, the little ones, the relationship and the progress in therapy is happening. So there is progress taking place when the little ones start to be drawn up, right? That the hope, almost like a lifeline or a little oxygen tube or a ray of light, is going to bring them up. So in that case, though, when the little ones come up, Mary will be, if my computer will catch up. So Mary's going to be pulled down. So by the time Tina finally comes up, we'll wait for the little pizza to, right? Then what happens is, because Mary is becoming more comfortable with the therapeutic relationship, Mary's relaxing, and so she's less guarded. She's less in her head, so to speak, less left brain. And so Mary then will come down or gets pulled in, and Tina is able to trade places. So that's when it goes from, inadvertent, let me see if I can do that, to, there you go. So it'll be more direct between myself and Tina. Okay. And then after Tina's been talking, and by that time it's probably going to be disclosing some abuse, then Tina goes back. And then I'm just going to get rid of that one just for the moment because we're going to transition, talk about some more stuff. And then Mary will come back. Mary will not remember consciously what Tina has disclosed. That's why it's very important, again, journaling. I can't emphasize that enough. Okay, we're going to sideline the community. I'm just going to put these up here because we'll probably need these in a moment. Okay. If any of you were live with me, I would ask if there are any questions. Emma, do you have any questions? I'll keep going here. But
Yeah,
if you,
keep going. You're doing great.
thank you. That's right. Keep going. No, I'm kidding, right? That's a supportive thing. No, because I will. Okay, here we go. So, again, for those of you just joining us, as far as if this is the first one, go back, watch previous ones. Repetition is the key to remembrance. That was some repetition, but I think adding, again, additional facets, because there's no way to say that this is going to be quick therapy. It's not. There's a lot going on. Now, again, how long can you anticipate in therapy? Again, the brief answer, I'll give you two brief answers. You can make this as long or as short as you want. Now, I think it's safe to say if you anticipate 2 to 3 years, don't get discouraged by that if somebody just said, oh, heavens. Okay. But it gets even worse, though. 2 to 3 years of a couple sessions per week. Okay. Your therapist should have a sliding fee scale. If you're a therapist and you're doing this kind of work, do not do this work. If I hear from a therapist that they work with clients once a week, I want to ask them, what's wrong with you? Now, those are my counter. I've got no therapist in mind, but don't do this, right? Don't do this kind of work if you think 1 hour once a week is going to be helpful. I'll tell you what I liken it to, and I had a real life experience. Okay, this is what it's likened to. If you start surgery with a client who who's been experienced ritualistic abuse, and how will you know it? Because you as a therapist, you're going to start to notice the indicators. Okay. So if you tell me you work with DID clients, with clients that have been ritualistically abused, if you say that, I'm going to take you up at face value. If you then tell me you work with clients and you schedule single-hour sessions once a week, I'm going to question if you know what you're doing. Because why? Will it make a difference? Yeah, okay, but I'll tell you what you're probably doing. Okay, is what I myself experienced in this sense. I noticed that, which ear was it? My left ear. Yeah, it's right there. Okay. Well, I had some little sunspot things going on my face, right? Some of you have been to the dermatologist, and I went for a couple of spots here, and it turns out, fortunately, nothing. But then I happened to say, oh, and there's one right here. And so that was the one that the doctor said, oh, so that it was at least the ones that I was suspecting. So I said, you know what? Let's biopsy that. And sure enough, they said, hey, we need to have you come in. I said, really? So I experienced getting a little section removed. That's very common these days. And we probably have an idea, maybe some of the reasons why there's an increase in skin cancer, but I digress. Well, so we line up the time for surgery. The doctor that saw me was not the surgeon, so we lined up the surgeon. Now, you would think that the medical center, the medical building, the practice that hired the surgeon would have thought through, and they do, but ready? That if they tell you and they give you the full price, we're paying cash, unfortunately, because we're in between insurance. And so they tell us the full amount. And so we paid half, and then we were going to pay half when the procedure was done. Okay, so the day arrives, and I go in, and he took out about a quarter, literally the size of a quarter. I'm like, oh gosh. Okay, so then I get to wait in the waiting room because they're going to have it biopsied to see if they got all of it, and then they tell me they didn't, so I have to go sit in the chair again. Okay, so that took a couple of hours. Procedure's done. I've got gauze on my ear. And guess what they tell me? Say, okay, now we're all finished, and the building across the way, you're going to want to go. The other doctor is over there. And I said, what? They say, well, yeah, it's across the street. And they'll tell you how much that's going to be. Okay, so what just happened to me? Talk about the ultimate bait and switch. So I sat in the chair. They opened me up. I've got this hole in my head. It was pretty gross. They put gauze on it and they say, okay, their job's done. They didn't tell me that they didn't sew it up. So the doctor opened me up, took the thing out, and then I was supposed to leave and then go discuss price. So there I walked across the street, sitting in the waiting room, was referred by, so a separate practice. I mean, what a racket they've got going. And so then the doctor sees me and he tells me some options, including skin graft and stuff. And then he tells me how much. Oh, that I believe is what a therapist will do if they start working with ritualistic abuse clients, where you only do 1 hour once a week. You're going to open up the clients and you're going to have them walk out of your office bleeding. Okay. Or you're going to take forever. Okay. So that's my own bias. A session needs to at least be 2 hours. Okay. That's my own bias. But I want to help clients get through this as soon as possible. Okay. So the length of time, probably 3 years. Now, does it have to be ideally 3 years? And I recommend start with 3 sessions per week, a block of 2 hours each. Now, that's ideal. It can be 2 hours, 2 sessions, 2 hours, but a minimum of 2 sessions per week, 2 hours. That's just what I do. Okay. So it's going to be long and intensive. Okay. Because again, look at how much you're going to be working with. And part of that is going to be establishing relationships. And there's a whole lot at stake for clients. Okay. So now we're going to go back to where we left off, which was we had looked at what I'm calling the co-conscious primary support team, because this has been with you, these parts have been with you for a long period of time, helping you function. And these are the ones that you've been hearing from and hearing kind of either just above you, so conversation going on between. And as we pointed out one time before, maybe we'll do it like this. Take one method of, what are we going to call these? These are representing lines of communication. So we could have the defensive and aggressive one carrying on a conversation with you. We then could have, this will be the guilty one, so the submissive one. So let's say it's your mother or mother-in-law or boss, somebody ticked you off in the here and now. And so let's say Mother's Day. Well, Mother's Day is going to come up here pretty soon, huh? So let's say Mary, as a matter of fact, this makes for, if you've ever heard of a love-hate relationship, this is exactly what's going on. Okay, so it's not traumatic bonding. It is you have different parts that aren't on board. Okay. So you can either have parts that are talking in one, I'm using this metaphorically, meaning one ear and the other, meaning they're going at the same time. So you can have just one that's talking to you, or one that starts and now another that steps up. And so you now are getting competing messages. Oftentimes, then what can happen is, let's say Dana is just about been successful in, I'm just going to put this over here. So let's say Dana steps in. Let's say we're thinking about Mother's Day, and Dana says, like hell, we're doing Mother's Day again. You remember what happened. And so Mary's saying, well, I don't know. And Dana says, no, absolutely not. We're not doing it. Well, okay. If that gets too much, because that's going to start to shake things up, right? Because what's mother going to do on Mother's Day? So some other parts are starting to feel the gravity, feel the weight of what Dana is suggesting. And if it gets too much, and if Dana is out, right? If Dana's not being stopped, then more than likely what'll happen is first Tanya is going to step in and giving a counter argument or counter persuasive statement. So Dana's saying, tell the old bag to go to hell. We're not doing, no, we're not, we're going to have a voice. We're going to stand up for ourselves. She never cared about us anyway. She's like mommy dearest. And now Tanya, now at first they kind of want, Tanya and Dana don't really like each other, obviously, up here, right? So it gets, and we'll talk about when that starts. Okay. But for right now, they would prefer to take the path of least resistance. So they're talking in each ear, not literally, but you're going to hear this like stereophonic. How's that for an old term? So you've got competing messages coming at you. Well, if Tanya starts to become increasingly persuasive, so first Dana was very persuasive and it pulled it pulled Tanya out. If Tanya is still, or Tanya, sorry, if Tanya is still increasingly persuasive, so Mary's starting to lean that way, what happens? This is very true. Sometimes I'm watching myself draw this. Sorry. It's so darn true. Okay. So at first, okay, that's what happens. Okay, wait, go back here for a second. Okay. I'm laughing at myself because I'm watching this diagram. This is pretty darn good. So Dana comes out. Mary's been thinking about Mother's Day. Dana says, okay, this time it's going to be different. Ain't no way we're going to do that. So Dana has given all these messages. Well, Mary is starting to be persuaded. So she's starting to align with her, being pulled toward Dana. Oh, but Tanya knows what happens. It's like, what? Do you know what Dana's suggesting? So now Tanya has to come out and she's got to give a counter argument to pull Mary back to her senses. So she's pulling Mary. So what happens? Tanya comes out because Dana was starting to pull Mary to persuade Mary to do it Dana's way. Well, she's starting to get pulled, and Tanya says, not so fast. And so now Tanya is starting to have a say. So now here it is. We've got this tug of war going on. It's almost like if you're familiar with Gilligan's Island, that show, there one time Gilligan was in between Skipper and the professor, I think. And, professor saying something and Skipper saying something. Each time Gilligan would say, oh, he's got a good point. Oh, he's got a good point. And so, meaning feeling pulled. We call that, being internally conflicted. Okay. So if this is now starting to generate too much angst, then what may happen is Mary may start to get pulled in, as it were, and now Dana and I'm going to use this term loosely, Sonia, they're going to have a shootout. Okay, I'm using that term loosely, by the way. Okay, meaning they're going to start to have, so they kind of go above, this is funny, they go above Mary's head, and that's where Mary will start to hear it from the inside in. Remember, the crazy voices are from the outside in. This is on the inside in. So we now have, I should almost make these. Let me see if I can let's get some arrows going on. Do we have arrows? Let me see if I can do this. That'll make it a little bit easier. Let's see if it'll come up here. I don't know if I can do that. Just for the heck of it, if I can get a little arrow going. Wait, no arrows down here. Oh, there. Okay, it worked. Okay, and then let me get another arrow. We're going to do an arrow down there. Okay, now we're going to flip that arrow around. And we're just going to do a little U-turn. There we go. Okay. So we have Tanya is shooting arrow, meaning Tanya is saying things to Dana, and Dana is giving it right back. Or actually, Dana probably started it, and that doesn't mean shame on Dana, but usually the more aggressive one is going to start it. But it could be that maybe Tanya was the first one out of the gate, so to speak, getting into Mary's ear, right? And then Dana had enough of that. And then all of a sudden now, right, they're going to shift from talking to Mary to now we've got parts fighting parts or arguing with parts. Okay, so we now have this ongoing dialogue. Well, look at Mary. So Mary is sensing there's this back and forth dialogue, she'll call it. And this is what she actually thinks when she hears and fears Mary, when Mary fears being crazy because she has heard that crazy people hear voices. And again, there's a difference, and this whole chart is on the inside of Mary. I've pulled Mary down because of the idea of dissociation, okay, where she's going to have a gap of time. But right now, she is co-conscious. That means while she is aware of the things around her, physically around her, so let's say she's at work or she's at home, she's somewhere, she knows where she is, she's sitting at her desk, but while she's sitting at her desk, what's going on in her mind? Okay, right? So she hasn't gone away per se. She doesn't have a gap in her memory. What she has is, while she's fully present in time and space and she knows where she is, she's got this secret battle going on up top. So, normal psychology calls this she's internally conflicted. She's at war with herself, thinking about, as a matter of fact, in the movie Tangled, we could say, as Rapunzel is swinging around the big oak tree, she might say, best day ever, right? Because, or, Amy could come out. Maybe Amy's the one because it was playful. Okay, we'll do that, right? So Amy's saying, best day ever. And then Tanya would say, oh, I'm such a horrible daughter. Okay, so it's a good movie. But in this case, we're thinking Mother's Day going to come up, and Dana's had it with Mother's Day, and Tanya is feeling like, oh no, I have to be a dutiful daughter. We could also have Stephanie. Stephanie's dutiful as well. So sometimes you could have ganging up. So we could have two against one. And that's where Mary may start to feel pulled by the degree of energy and persuasion, as it were. Okay, so if they do, that is interesting because that's very true. Because let's say also there's, let's say, a niece. Okay, so Mother's Day, they don't want to go. So, oh, we have to be a good daughter. It's the right thing to do. We got to honor our parents. And then all of a sudden, let's say Amy remembers that her favorite little niece is going to be there, and that a part of Amy loves playing with her little niece. So Amy might join this group. So she said, I want to go. Oh, sorry. Where's Amy here? We got to go, old Amy. There we go. So Amy says, I want to go. I want to go. I want to go. And then maybe helpful part, I'm thinking what would be helpful here? Maybe helpful in the sense of lowering stress. Let's just be pragmatic. So the helpful part, Brenda might come in as well. Okay, so you can see now we've got 4 against 1. Well, Dana, you know what? Dana gets to a point. Oh, everybody's ganging up on Dana here, right? Because they all feel what about Dana? They feel that Dana, a lot of different things. Dana's not helpful. Dana's over the top. Dana's not spiritual. Dana doesn't honor parents. And therefore, as a matter of fact, what do all of these parts think that should happen to Dana? They will tell Mary, all these parts will tell Mary that Dana is at best an unnecessary evil. I use that term, meaning that really that Mary shouldn't listen to Dana because Dana doesn't have the fruit of the Spirit. Dana's angry all the time. Dana needs to become more mature because only angry people must be immature. So some of the parts can gang up together and pile on. And eventually, what does Dana do? Now, Dana could do one of a couple of things. Dana has all their power, by the way, right? That's why they need more. They need to outnumber. Really, it takes then 4 to 1 to match Dana's power. We would say Dana has common sense. No, Dana has all the intuitive sense. Ain't nothing wrong with Dana's intuition, by the way. That's an interesting thought. So if all of these become so persuasive enough to start to pull Mary over to their side, to persuade Mary, then either Mary's going to begin to double down in a couple different ways, double down on the message. So Dana's going to start to really give it to Mary, trying to, knock some sense into her. Like, girl, what's going on with you? I mean, think. Don't be led by your emotions. Now, in a way, Dana is very what? Dana is very intense in terms of her emotions as well. Nothing wrong with the emotions, right? But Dana will do one of two things probably because Dana knows she's losing the argument. She's losing the game. So not a game, but meaning if Mary goes over here, guess where Mary's going for Mother's Day, right? Same old, same old. And here's the thing. Every time Mary has gone over to her mother's for Mother's Day and joined the family, what happens after? What happens during and what happens after? Okay. That's what all of these are choosing to forget. So you tell me, audience, if you're listening to, right? What happens when Mary, so everybody's been persuasive and off they go to Mother's Day. And, she walks through the door. Mary does. Mary's body walks through the door. I'm going to put Stephanie back here. Okay. And so Mary goes to Mother's Day. So, Mary's cutting herself off from her emotions, and Mary functionally walks through the door. Let me see if I can get this arrow out of the way. Okay. So fast forward now. Mary, we're going to see what's happened in the past, because why is Dana so insistent that we're not doing that anymore? Okay, because of what happened last year. And what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing time and time again, yet anticipating a different outcome. So why in the world would Mary consider going to Mother's house, going to Mother's Day, when every single Mother's Day, what happens? Okay. Who do you think knows exactly what happens? Dana knows exactly what happens. Why? Because after Mary either arrives or after the day is over, the event, if Mary stays for the full time, what happens to Mary? Right? She becomes compulsive, right? Mary starts to feel stuff. And quite frankly, what Mary is feeling is at that level. That level is more than likely, as a matter of fact, I'm going to go out on a limb. I think this is very true. Right now, or at the outset, again, this level, so the co-conscious parts, they can see the level up, one level up, or like being underwater in this sense. You can look from underwater, you're scuba diving, and you look to the surface. So you can see anything that's above you. They don't necessarily know that all of this is at a deeper level. But all they know is this, especially Dana, that when Mary gets together, sorry for all these lines here, but you know what? Let me get rid of these now. Okay. I'm going to get rid of 2 of those. Okay. But all Dana knows is this, that the last time Mary, out of guilt, went to mom's house for Mother's Day, either during or after, shortly thereafter, what happened? Mary became compulsive, but Mary also lost track of time. Tension rose, and before Mary knew it, I'm going to give an example. Before Mary knew it, we're going to allow somebody came up and Mary got pulled down. And who came up? As a matter of fact, just so everybody can see. Where's my little chart? There we go. I'm going to enlarge this now. There we are. Okay, so after Mother's Day, we'll say the day after. If the stronger Mary is, and this meaning the more she can be in denial or keep her emotions at bay, and again, Mary will think she's weak, but the stronger she is, the more of a delay. So it may be in 2 days, maybe 3 days, or if she's getting tired, it'll be as soon as she leaves. She's going to go drink, she's going to go eat, she's going to go smoke. But then before she knows it, Mary has now lost time. Mary dissociated. And what happened? A part of her is out. Call her Freebird. Right? Now, she doesn't know it. Maybe she chose that name because of the idea of spontaneity. But she's spontaneous and she's what? There we go. So Mary may go on a bender. Mary may go on a binge the next couple of days. It may also be, now, is Mary going to remember? No, right? Where is Mary? Mary's been pulled in. So Mary's losing track of all this time. As a matter of fact, I'm going to cover up the core part because that's at a deeper level as soon as my computer catches up. Okay, so we're going to pull that down. There we go. So right now, because this would be dissociation. Mary only remembers up to a certain point, and it's really up to the point that what Freebird did is Freebird grabbed Mary and pulled her in. Okay. Now remember, Freebird is in Mary's body. So when people see Freebird, they're seeing Mary, but they're seeing a very different part. Yeah, a very different part or aspect of Mary's personality. So all people know is, whoa, hey, Mary, what you doing? If they see Mary at the grocery store, Mary's got her shopping cart filled with 87 gallons of ice cream, or she's going on an ice cream bender or a bunch of pizza. Okay. Or they see Mary at the liquor store, or they see Mary at the bar. Well, that's interesting because I'm going to pull Mary back out for a second, right? Because normally Mary is a Sunday school teacher and she sings in the choir. But all of a sudden, where is Mary? Maybe Saturday night, she's at a bar hoisting a few. But she went to a bar far enough out of town to where the likelihood of anybody in her congregation seeing her is pretty unlikely. So, and she did it. The last thing Mary knew is Mary might have even thought, you know what? I'm going to go to the early service because I need to pray because my nerves are a wreck and I just need to pray here it is. I need to pray to ask God to help me with forgiving my mother. Oh, this is classic. Okay. So the last thing Mary remembered, she was getting ready for church. And then the next thing she remembers, oh, okay, right? The next thing she's getting ready to go to church. She doesn't even know that she never made it to church. She went 100 miles away to the big city and she lived it up. And she even possibly did what? That's right. She may have spent the night in a hotel with a guy. And then after they drive home and when things have calmed down, let's say Sunday morning. No, they missed Sunday church. Oh, we're going to put her back in that category. But let's say she comes to Sunday evening. Now, when I say come to, it doesn't mean she passed out because remember, Mary drove home. But the last thing Mary remembered is she was getting ready for Saturday night church service. There are some churches that have Saturday night. So we'll put a time frame here. So Saturday night, let's say they did Mother's Day celebration on Saturday for whatever reason. Okay, so she was with her mother earlier that day, and now she feels all agitated. She feels anxious. That's adrenaline, as we talked about. So Mary just thinks, you know what? Here's the problem. I just have to practice forgiveness again. I just need to be around. I need to go to church and pray for forgiveness and ask the Lord to help me with forgiveness. So Mary's getting ready for church Saturday evening. And the next thing she knows, it is Monday morning and she's getting ready for work, or she wakes up in her bed. The alarm's going off. And she looks at the time. She thinks, didn't I go to church? What is this, Sunday? Am I going, right? So she's lost a day and a half. Well, she doesn't know where she's been, but because this has happened so often, she just chalks it up to a bad memory. Or as I have a client, bless her heart, she's used the term, sorry, we'll get those little arrows out of the way. She's used a term, she thinks she has a broken brain. Nothing wrong with her brain. She's trying to make sense of these gaps of time. Okay, so gaps of time do not mean that there's anything wrong with your memory, by the way. That sounds contradictory, I know, but I tell you what, is there a part of her that knows where they were from Saturday night to Sunday night? You bet, right? So just because Mary doesn't remember doesn't mean that parts of her couldn't tell her exactly what happened. Okay, so Mary wakes up and all she knows is it's Monday and she's thinking, what the heck? And so she knows she has to get ready for work, but she's groggy and so she calls in maybe to work saying, you know what, I'll be in half day. Okay, so it's now impacting, right, her life. So let's say Mary, or maybe she's going to try to make it to work, but I'll come up with a scenario. So maybe she has the ability to call in. She's going to come in for a half day. Maybe she makes up stories, right? And she feels guilty about that, but maybe she calls in saying, oh, I'm sorry, I totally forgot. I have an orthodontist appointment. I have a dentist appointment. I have a proctology. I don't know. Sorry. And so she makes an excuse, but it buys her extra time. Let's say the boss is okay with it. So Mary's now getting up. Let's say it's 8 o'clock or it's 9 o'clock. And Mary still is rubbing her head, trying to figure out what's going on. And so Mary gets up, she goes and washes her face, and she looks and she sees some perfume out. And she sees certain earrings that it's like, I don't remember putting those on. So she then kind of rounds the corner and she passes by a chair where sometimes she just puts clothes on the chair like we all do, right? And she sees a really skimpy leather mini skirt or some, it's a really sexy skirt or dress, tight fitting dress or something. And Mary says, what? What is that? I think I remember seeing that in my closet, but I'd never be caught dead in that. I don't wear that. So what's happening again? Mary is starting to see evidence so there's indicators that there's something else going on. So just because she doesn't know where it came from doesn't mean it automatically, poof, was there. What it means is her hands laid that dress there. It meant her fingers took those earrings out of her ears and laid them on the bathroom counter. By the way, now here's another question. If Brandy or Freebird really didn't want Mary knowing of their existence, would Brandy have left the dress out for Mary to see it? If Freebird didn't want Mary to know about the spontaneity, would she have left the car empty with gas? Would Freebird have left certain indicators of possibly where they were Saturday night, like receipts? Again, I'm just kind of making this up as we go. So what you then have is the indication for the very first time, not really the first time, but this will start to be when Mary starts to become aware. And this may be the time that Mary actually may seek out therapy. Or if therapy has begun to get underway, this will be very early on, because it'll be when maybe the therapist that she has chosen is aware of this concept. And so hopefully the therapist would have already gone through sort of that checklist, the dissociation kind of checklist and other things that they experience. And the very fact that the therapist would begin to go through that checklist of what Mary might experience, that indicates parts, which indicates trauma, which more than likely indicates some sexual abuse. That's also enough to help her start to become aware of that there's something going on. Now, she may not have direct awareness, but she has enough awareness, of what parts already. That's right. Remember what happened before? Okay, where's our submissive part? Right? So this becomes her world, her experience. So we have two levels of things going on for Mary. We have kind of the everyday stuff that she lives with. And where did that go? Oh, there we go. Sorry. Okay. So she lives with that. And then when it gets too much, what happens? She kind of ducks down. She doesn't know she's ducked. Actually, they they raise themselves up and they stop targeting Mary, and they're going to start targeting each other. Okay. So they go up. And now we have that kind of over the head dialogue, right, within the mind. So at first it was towards her, but it also could be, oh, would you be quiet? Nobody wants to talk to you. And listen to me now, Mary. So we've got these, like, it's all over the place sometimes, but sometimes it's just going to be above. Okay. So, I could draw more arrows. So we could have these kind of, as a matter of fact, let me do that just for the heck of it. Copy. And then let's see if I can do paste. Oh, yes, that's good. Okay. So we'll do, if I can grab that. There we go. So we've got crosstalk, and then I'm going to do one more here. Then paste. Okay. So everybody, I encourage you to draw your own chart. Use Word document right there. Okay. So this becomes Mary's life. This is her daily life, which is, okay, that's her daily life right there. But that comes from what? Because she is familiar. Oh gosh, she's familiar with, just trade places with them. Okay, you see how that works. So that dynamic is what Mary lives with. Oh gosh. Oh no, hold on. We took the whole thing here. So sometimes, how about they want to go play, but the dutiful Stephanie. So Amy says, "Let's go play." Or okay, I just thought of something. Sorry, the ice cream truck. Oh gosh, right? Don't tell me. Okay, so let's say, oh, this is too funny. Let's say Mary's having a Bible study or a business meeting. Oh, okay, or a Zoom business meeting, something. So Mary's supposed to be mature and she's supposed to be fully present, and she's doing something at home with a group. So it could either be on a Zoom call or she's got the ladies over. And so she's being dutiful. Mary is, and all of a sudden she hears in the background the ice cream truck. Well, the closer it gets, and the sound starts to trigger what? Of course, Amy's going ice cream, ice cream. Well, oh, that's funny. So maybe at first Amy's poll is very small, and we have dutiful, right? But then the closer the ice cream truck gets, Amy's starting to become much more pronounced, and maybe there's and Stephanie's starting to lose. Right? But then Stephanie tries to, how's she going to do it? Maybe guilt. And so now it's war of the impulses. That's very true. I mean, Amy's impulsive. We got impulse versus guilt. Now, if you're familiar with transactional analysis back in the 70s, and there used to be an old song, you can look it up. They probably on YouTube, a music video called Games People Play. That was the title of a book, by the way, Eric Burns, I believe. And they would talk about that we have the adult. Think about ego states. Freud talked about the ego, the id, and the superego. So right now we might have the superego was the super responsible, dutiful one. The ego is just a normal state, but the id is the impulsive part. Um, Transactional analysis, TA, has the same parts. Back in the 80s, we started to hear about the child within. So people have sensed, right, different parts of themselves for a long time. But again, why are we talking about it? Because it's not only talking about this level, but for purposes of FSRA or MK Ultra, again, all of that is abuse. This is intentional. I mean, all this abuse is going to be, that can be reactive abuse. That can create all of that. But the more sadistic and the more knowledgeable is, the more purposeful and willful and tactical the abuser, then that's where all that stuff comes in, because that's going to be harming a child. So that'll be really from the bottom up. Let's see if I can show that. I don't know if it's working here. Okay, there we go. Because that the SRA, the ritualistic abuse that turns into SRA, it turns into, or MK Ultra and SRA are two different things, but you can have perps that participate in both. Okay, so two different layers, as it were. So this that I'm covering up right now is applicable to ritualistic abuse, SRA, and MK Ultra, meaning it's all on a scale of 1 to 10. Okay, but anybody with trauma will experience these three layers right here. Okay. Now, I should say this. Okay. You'll have, maybe we'll do this. You'll have the green, but not as much. Okay. That's probably, now IFS will come along and say, no, John, what about the firefighters? Okay. But again, we're talking about with these lower levels, ritualistic abuse. Okay. So it's easier to think in terms of at first that anybody that dissociates, and you can have amnestic or amnesic dissociation, it's amnestic dissociation, without somebody being aware of the parts. And conceptually, can somebody have amnesia without parts? Certainly, yes. And you'll hear that even in the video that at the interview. Okay, so a car accident. What else? Something other, well, an adult traumatic event won't create parts per se. Okay, so a lot of that, you'll just have amnesia. Okay, but if you've been through abuse, but especially SRA or MK Ultra, this entire chart comes into play. Okay, what I have just described is, again, the everyday experience, and then when you get triggered. When you get triggered, you're now identifying or experiencing this level. For therapy, you really are beginning to make good headway, but it'll feel like therapy is starting to get very difficult, and it'll start to feel overwhelming, but just know it's a good thing when you start to experience these parts. Because these parts how am I going to say this? These parts, all parts are 100% important. All parts are of equal value. But the degree of intensity will differ. And when you're dealing with the parts at this level, you're getting closer to deeper pain. So that's why, without really getting triggered, you're experiencing that a lot, right? You don't have to get, gosh, sorry. Okay. How about getting ready in the morning? Why is it that um, a lot of female survivors that have parts run late a lot because their different parts are changing outfits? Okay. That's pretty much in a way at this level. Now that may sound contradictory because I just showed, right, what happened when Brandy came out and Brandy went to the bar. Okay. But think about that scenario. That was after what? Being with mom. Okay. But the run of the mill everyday day stuff will be at this level. And that's why it's also, oops, sorry. I don't know why it's doing that. That's why it's called co-conscious. So the everyday without being triggered stuff, that doesn't mean that you don't start to become intense, because look at Dana over here, right? Dana only has to come out when there's something frustrating going on. She can become aggressive, but that's different. The frustrations in life versus what? Versus being triggered. Big difference. So when you get triggered, just know that all of a sudden, I'll do this for dramatic effect. Everything was fine until that phone call. That phone call triggered you. You may have dealt with a bunch of jerks during the day, but why is it that one phone call, let's say your mom calls through, all of a sudden what happens? You freeze or you do something, right? That you can take a lot of phone calls, but it was that one phone call, then before you know it, boom. Okay. Now, I just did that for dramatic effect to let you know that suddenly you tapped into that level. Okay. So when you get triggered, this co-conscious level, in a way, dies down all of a sudden. Almost a freeze frame kind of thing, but they die down. And in a way, they don't know what happened. So let's say Dana was out. Now, that may sound funny. I'm going to push some of these arrows just to get them out of the picture just for a second. Okay. I mentioned this the last time, but let's say somebody, I think I used the term a coworker. Coworker comes in, we'll just draw a coworker here just for the heck of it. Let me find, nope. Oh gosh. Okay. So we're going to say that's coworker. What color? Let's just do, for the heck of it, we'll do just to stand out, just for the sake of time. Okay. So here's boss or coworker. Okay. Matter of fact, I don't even know if I can write it in there. But anyway, so let's just pretend that is coworker, unless I can write that in. Can't. Okay, so just go with this. So this is the person that's irritating you. Coming in, coworker, somebody's, kind of jabbing you, poking you, meaning verbally doing stuff. Well, you can only take so much. And before you know it, Dana can't take it anymore. Dana's, as a matter of fact, Dana here's how it starts. So somebody comes up to you and is starting to be obnoxious, starting to be irritating, right? And you go, oh, great. When you see them, you take a deep breath, saying, oh, here comes Sally, or here comes Mr. So-and-so, here comes boss. And they come up and they start, right? They're poke, 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 when you did this or what, so they're ill-intended. How do you know they're ill-intended? Because you don't think they can see what's happening on on your face. Why do they keep it up? Why do they ask, oh, when I said that to you, did it hurt? I'm sorry, not did it hurt you, right? But I began thinking, and I'm sorry if that hurt you, and I don't want to do that again. And then they would stop. Okay, but we almost have eyes floating. Okay, but it's the person that won't stop. Okay, so they come around the corner again, and now they're standing over you. They're standing in your cubicle. They're on your phone. They're talking to you. Whatever it is, the person that's irritating or exasperating. Okay. you're trying to tolerate. They keep doing it, and then they're not stopping. And so what happens? You get so flustered because you're not familiar with and you're not okay with your anger. So who has to have your anger? Well, Dana. So suddenly there's a switch and Dana has had it. And so now what happens? We talked about this before, where little Miss Sally Obnoxious, the coworker or the boss, but we'll just say coworker. The coworker has been jabbing, 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 jabbing. Now all of a sudden, Mary's been tolerating, and now Dana comes out, Mary gets pulled in, and before you know it, all of a sudden, now Mary's body, Mary's mouth starts, meaning Mary, all this person knows is Mary suddenly changes, switches up, and now Mary, but really Dana, has had it, and so Mary gives it back to her, and then some. Well, all of a sudden, they shrink in size and they run away. Okay, let's see. Okay, so now they're out of the picture again. Okay, and so now the arrows stop, and now Dana feels very satisfied. But Dana's also frustrated with Mary, and so now Dana isn't needed. That anger isn't needed, or the aggressiveness isn't necessary, and so the threat has gone, and so Mary comes back out. Now, Mary may or may not have heard the exchange. Let's say she heard it up to a point. So let's say we're going to, I had the coworker go away, huh? So we're going to draw another, let's bring our little coworker back here. And we'll give that color just to stand out. Okay. So let's say coworker is bugging us. She's shooting arrows and Dana is giving pushback. And let's say this time, the coworker decides to do something up the ante, sorry, not Annie, and all of a sudden fires both barrels and postures. So she didn't back off. That's a good way to put it, right? So she comes and she's at this level, and the coworker started it. Right? We're going to put Mary back where she belongs, so to speak. Okay, so here's Mary. Here comes the coworker. Poke, poke, poke. Mary is starting to this interesting decrease in size, and she's not standing up for herself, starting to disappear. And so that's where Dana says, dang it, girl, stand up for yourself. So she steps in. I'm going to make Dana just a little smaller just for the second, right? So Dana is hearing it. Dana can't stand it and pulls Mary in. And Dana says, I'll take it from here. And so now we're going to watch the exchange. So Dana says, oh, yeah, you know what? For someone with your kind of hairstyle and your kind of, I don't know, I would, she gives it back to her. Well, let's say in the past or normally when she's done that, it puts the person, I'm going to bring them down a size or two. Okay. So that would be very satisfying because that also means the likelihood that this coworker is going to repeat that would be less than decreased. So we might say, oh, yeah, well, yeah, I think you're too big for your britches. And so we pull them down a size or two. But what happens if this particular day, so Dana has been up for this job, and in the past, it's always taken the threat or the obnoxious person and decreased the threat. And then they tuck their tail and they have to go away. And so then the discussion's over. But let's say this time, Dana is going to give that same person the same degree of pushback. But in this case, let's say that same coworker, instead of decreasing, this could be mother as well. In this particular case, they posture. Whoa, you notice what happened there. So now it's like they're doubling down on it. So now we went from being obnoxious, now we got gaslighting, and now we're gone from hysterical to historical. Well, you never, and if you were a better daughter, so we could even say this is mom. So at that point, the method that Dana has used and the way Dana has been effective in the past suddenly isn't working. So what happens? All of a sudden, Dana starts to do what? Decrease, right? Dana now her anxiety starts to go up. Well, when that happens, now their normal coping skills, their normal level of problem solving, which has been still pretty much black or white, either or, meaning it shifts, hasn't worked. And so now, let's say for the first time in this kind of back and forth exchange, mom postured even more. And so what happens is now Dana is outside her comfort zone, even though she's been very aggressive in the past. So all of a sudden, she's hit her limit. And now what happens? Now we have our resident MMA fighter. I get it right. And so all of a sudden now, and we were at, okay, for dramatic effect, this was all at that level. So when that when that co-conscious level isn't working any longer, now we would say not only was Mary triggered to be pushed, to have Dana come out, but now Mary is really being triggered, or we would say now Dana is being triggered. So what happens? Jimmy pulls Dana in and Jimmy comes out. Well, now we're going to do this for a second. Different ball game where, they brought a squirt gun and a BB gun to the fight. Guess what Jimmy's brought? Nuclear missiles. Okay. And now this person, mother or whoever, has never met the likes of Jimmy. And all of a sudden, because Jimmy now is going to get aggressive as well, if not even physically, or Jimmy's not going to hold back. That's the whole thing. Jimmy doesn't even care. As a matter of fact, Jimmy has no allegiance or loyalty to this person whatsoever, or very little. Okay. And so what happens then is this becomes very effective and takes them down to size. Okay. And now this person represents less of a threat, and now they huff off. Okay. And now it's over. And they take their little arrows with them. Okay. So now the threat, the incident, the event is over. So the arrows don't have to fly anymore. And then what happens? That's interesting. The reverse happens, but not so much 100% reverse. What happens is Mary comes out. And you notice they didn't go in reverse, that when Jimmy comes back, it's not that Dana has to come back first. That would be in reverse order. It doesn't happen that way, because once Jimmy has accomplished, once it's been mission accomplished, and in a way we could say this, Dana is either going to be unconscious, this may be interesting, unconscious or somewhat, we could even say there may be co-conscious between these two levels. So there may be co-conscious between Jimmy and Dana. But Dana might not have ever thought it through. So very likely what happened when Jimmy came out, even Dana experienced dissociation. So Dana may not be aware. So that's interesting, because Mary certainly isn't aware of that exchange, or maybe she was hearing, right? When Dana was out, actually Mary was hearing herself go after mom. So let's say that black circle represented mom. So Mary is hearing herself, because it's co-conscious, hearing herself stand up for herself. But when it triggered, then it was too much for Dana. So when Jimmy came out, Dana gets pulled in. And now, because it's at the subconscious level, it may likely be that neither Mary nor Dana remember, quote unquote, what the body said, meaning what they said to mom. And so by the time Jimmy has done his work, Jimmy now is, in a way, Jimmy does know about Dana and Mary. Not in a way, Jimmy knows. So Jimmy was watching. So I shouldn't say in a way. So what'll happen though, Jimmy hasn't wanted to show himself. So now that he had to and take care of business, he kind of goes away in a huff, like, don't bother me again. But he also knows it's a risk, because They don't want to be known. Why? Because if you get to know them, then they'll have to start talking. And right now, they don't know why they do what they do. They just know they do it. So we would say these are the compulsive ones in the sense that it reaches a point and they respond. They step in. And it's not so much calculated, but it reaches a threshold, and before they know it, they're out. Okay. Along with pulling, they're very much aware that they pull them in. Okay. We haven't even gotten to that level. But it's good because what we'll talk about next time, and Emma, that's probably, we'll leave it at that. That was a little bit of review. I think we had a little bit more. But what we'll do next time is we'll start to talk about the different categories or segmentations within, because we're going to bring Mary back out. And what we're going to do next time, and again, I'm just thinking through, this is really the process of therapy, kind of how it will proceed. Let's get our arrow back out here. So we're going to draw arrows, or we'll draw one. Let me get it large. So everybody will be able to draw their own map by the time we're done, huh? This will be good. You'll know how to do it. And I want to go with, we're going to give weight to it right there. There we go. So this happens every day. And also, or we could flip it around, right? We can say that this happens every day. When it gets triggered, we're at this level, right? So this is co-conscious all the time. This stuff's going on all the time. When you get triggered, you're at this level now. Now, what's important to know is just as these parts may not all get along, they're kind of willing to they're willing to coexist on the co-conscious level. And not so much coexist, but they know of each other, right? Remember, when Dana was talking to whoever, the submissive one, Tanya, right? They very much know they're there. Okay. But at this level still, they really don't know that these guys are down there. But these guys know about all these guys. Okay, so we're going to kind of go down to this layer. We introduced again a dynamic. We showed how Jimmy will come out. We also showed how Brandy might come out. That's the seductive one. We talked about Freebird. But now we'll also talk about the relationships from these different categories, because there's a greater degree of separateness, as you see here, versus up here. So the co-conscious parts, I'm just drawing with arrow for the heck of it. Okay, so the co-conscious parts are familiar with one another, and they interact a lot, sometimes even on a daily basis with each other. Not saying they all like each other, but they're very familiar with that. This level up here is not really aware of this level, but on some level they sense, because like Dana is confused because the last thing she knew, she was starting to get overwhelmed, and then the last thing she knew is war's over and she doesn't know what happened. But Jimmy knows. And so we'll talk about the relationship one to another down in here. And then we'll talk about the relationship or lack thereof, and the separateness, and how sometimes one group can't get to the other. That sounded funny, huh? But it's true. So, and therefore they may not really, there's just going to be a much more abrupt kind of conversation. The reason I grabbed Hannah, for instance, sacrificial, is if they ever interact, it's going to be much more abrupt and intense than that co-conscious level. And so we'll look at the personality states down here, and usually what causes them, and how somebody can end up for a time being stuck in one of these states. So if anybody's ever experienced where before you know it, you've driven cross country, you've spent credit card after credit card, or you've racked up credit card bills, well, guess which category you might suddenly be stuck in. And then we'll talk about how eventually we'll be able to see where those parts come in. So, Emma, I think that may be enough for tonight.
Wonderful. That was fantastic. Thank you so much for going over all of that. I love this visual that you made. It's so helpful, I think, to have a visual component while you're listening, because it can be really hard to picture all of this. And there are so many moving parts. So I know it's easier, I'm sure, for you too, to be able to explain this, having something like this in front of you. But it really does help people to see inside the mind of somebody who has parts, and if you don't have parts, and if you haven't been through this horrific trauma and abuse and can't relate, it can be really hard to understand this, and understanding this is such a big part of being able to help and being able to talk to survivors and be there for them and understand, just even how to be a good friend, even if you're not working with somebody in a therapeutic setting like you are. It's so valuable to not have to think so hard about what somebody's going through, and to be able to be present with them because you have a basic understanding, and what you're doing is so important. It's awesome getting to see a visual component put with this and hearing it in a clinical way. You're normalizing it, you're demystifying it, you're giving survivors a voice and credibility through what you're doing, and their testimony should be credibility enough, but when a therapist comes on board and somebody who is educated in this comes forward and validates it, it just adds another, layer of security and validation to what their stories are, and you explain it in a way from your background and your experience from a third party perspective. It's really interesting to see how you've came about your learnings, your experiences, hearing how you've put together these puzzle pieces yourself through having clients that have gone through really hard things, and watching your journey and hearing about how you grew into your own understanding, even if it was very foreign to you. So I commend you on this work. It's so important what you're doing, Jon. It's awesome what you're doing. It's so valuable. And like I said, I know the people that watch my channel and really advocate for you and for the healing. That's a really big part of the whole journey. Like that's what's most important when a survivor remembers, is being safe and understanding how to heal. And you're helping give tools for that, and you're doing it for free. So I really appreciate you coming on today and sharing.
Well, you're more than welcome. And Emma, I'm appreciative of you and your dedication to all those who have subscribed. You're doing a tremendous service. So I figure, if you are stepping out and doing this, then to what extent I can help, right? Add my little part. I think it's a wonderful thing, a right thing at the right time. And I would recommend people access your material on journaling, because there's no better way to facilitate healing, to facilitate the exploration, and then getting to know the parts. Journaling is the key. So please make use of, Emma, as you have mentioned, you are getting into journaling. There's no more important means of really starting to get to know yourself than journaling. So I'd highly recommend it.
Is there anything else that we left out, Jon, that you wanted to cover today?
No, I think that was sufficient. I mean, the chunk that we covered. And again, I encourage everybody. Well, this is sort of self-evident because this is being aired originally on your channel. So I recommend people continue to watch Emma, watch the episodes, spread the word. And then I'm just very appreciative, Emma, for your dedication, and then kind of extending this opportunity, right, for us to just kind of do an ongoing series, because as I've used the phrase now a couple of times, I think it's the right thing at the right time. So this has helped me. So what people are actually seeing, right? I even chuckle, and you all are hearing it live as I'm going through the little chart, because eventually I'll put this in a book form. So in a way, what is happening now is helping me methodically think in terms of chapters and the flow of what eventually will be a book. So when you see me start to laugh at myself, it's like, oh yeah, of course that's how. So we're kind of developing something real time. So it's hopefully will be very, very beneficial.
That's really exciting. I can't wait for that. And this has been extremely valuable. You devote so many hours of your time every week to my podcast, to your podcast, to helping other people. So thank you. And I encourage everybody again to go follow Jon, to go support him. He does have a donate link on his blog and on his SurvivorSupport.net. So you can go there, scroll down just a little bit. I always encourage people, we're so caught up in donating to third parties, nonprofits, and, I think giving to something is in a lot of our hearts, and we don't always know the right places to go. And I always say, go support the guests on the show, right where your money's going, what it's funding. Jon gives so much of his time for free. This is not cheap to do this. It's definitely not cheap either on the time end. Jon deserves to be compensated so he could keep doing this, and so he can fund equipment and platforms that he's on. So please go donate to him. Go give him an extra $1, $5 or $10 or more, whatever you can give. It goes a long way, you guys. My guests never ever ask for money. I just think it's great whenever they have options to give. We need to resource people doing things that the government will never pay them for, and I think that if we all come together and do that instead of throwing our money at third parties and nonprofits and people who really don't have the best interest in mind of survivors, or who keep some of those funds for themselves, and it doesn't go directly to their own work that they're promoting. I think that we should rethink that and look at going independent with where we give our time, energy, and money. So whether you're paying Jon as a physical monetary donation, or you're paying him with your attention, go to his website, browse all of his videos. Again, he has awesome videos on forgiveness, boundaries, biblical etymology, and how it pertains to, abuse, forgiveness, and so much more. His YouTube channels are just hours and hours and hours of information for you guys. So please go follow him, support him. Get his followers up on Unmasking the Trans Movement. I'm sure that channel is extremely shadow banned. So please go try to support that and share it as much as you can to get those views up, you guys. I will have all of his information in the show notes. I will have all of my information in the show notes too. Connect with us on as many platforms as you can. I'm so grateful for all of you guys. Thank you so much for your support. God bless you, and we will see you next time.
We cannot explain what you are about to hear. Science doesn't know enough about the brain to make sense of Alma,